Sylvia, thank you so much for agreeing to join us today for an episode of the podcast. It's absolutely brilliant to have you join us on this Friday morning. Thank you for coming along.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Excellent stuff. Sylvia, as you know, first sort of 20 minutes or so of the show is all focused on our guests, or our listeners, sorry, getting to know you as a guest. I don't know, you've had a chance to listen to a few of other shows. Some of our guests like literally just choose to go back to the very beginnings, if you like, the origins of what's inspired them to do what they've ultimately chosen to do with their careers, and others have started a little bit later. Wherever you want to start, just give us a flavor of you and your background, and in particular, what have been those really like key motivations and passion points, if you like, that have led you to do what you do now?
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, when it comes to my career, I pretty much started my career working agency side. So I worked for big multinationals running their digital campaigns. So if you think about like HP, which is Consumer and Business Electronics, Friesland Campina, which is a dairy FMCG, all really big kind of businesses, really international. A lot around kind of like building up market share and awareness. So I was agency side for almost 3 years, but
And
then I
Sylvia,
just
sorry to interrupt you in full flight already, but just so that people are absolutely clear, when you say agency side, you're working within a marketing capacity, is that right?
yeah. So digital marketing, so running their online campaigns, mainly on kind of like Meta, Google, those kind of platforms. Anything from like actually running the campaigns to like reporting the strategy around it, anything like that. Um, yeah, so I was doing that for almost 3 years. Then I decided I wanted to kind of be involved in more variety of different marketing projects. So I think agency side, you're kind of you have to become quite specialized in a certain area of marketing. And I really wanted to discover more of a breadth of, marketing avenues that I could take. Also, I think that there's less transparency in terms of the work you're doing. So I really wanted to see the impact of kind of what my marketing was having on actual business. And that's when I decided that I wanted to work for smaller businesses. So I kind of started my journey in the startup world. I worked for quite a variety of different types of startups, from like a skin clinic to kind of Albright, which is a business women's network offering like courses and events. And I kind of ended up at Seek. So there was no real intention to kind of work for a sustainable brand in particular. But I think what I was always looking for was to work for, a business that was doing something positive. So for example, when I worked at Albright, it was all about like supporting women in business, through these networking opportunities and events. And then when I came across Seep, I thought that what Laura was doing was really different. So Laura, founder, it was my first interview with her basically, and I had never seen plastic cleaning tools before in any like aisle that I walked down. I thought the mission was really exciting. Meeting Laura was really great. So the team seemed really great and positive. So I just decided to go for it. So yeah, sustainability was never uh, something that I focused on, but definitely like businesses that have a positive kind of impact on like society or people, I think was always a big interest or a key point for me.
That's super interesting. So, and thank you for you've provided a brilliant kind of nutshell and introduction, if you like, to your the career sort of choices that you've made. I want to go back a little bit to kind of the earlier kind of motivations and drivers that led you to, I know, initially go into digital marketing roles, working with, I guess, some of those larger organizations on the agency side. Can you just talk us through kind of perhaps like your higher education, like what was the inspiration behind making those decisions? Like what were the things in your schooling that kind of inspired you to ultimately decide to do what you do?
Yeah, so it wasn't ever very clear for me. So when I came out of high school, for example, I didn't know what direction I wanted to go down. I actually did a 1 year foundation degree in art and design, and that was in Birmingham, so all the way up in the north. And through that, so I really enjoyed like the arts, the creative side of things. But through that, I learned about like graphics design. So I specialized in graphics design during that 1 year course. And there I was exposed to marketing, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting because I can get that creative side, but also I can also get the more strategic technical side of things as part of a role. And that's when I really decided that I wanted to go into marketing. So then I did my bachelor's in business and marketing management, and that was in Oxford. So making my way down, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I decided I wanted to continue to do a master's. So I came down to London, did my master's in strategic marketing at Imperial. And that was, I guess, more technical, more on the digital kind of innovative online side. So that was, yeah, very interesting. So it wasn't ever like a clear path, but it was one that kind of really, I was able to, it appealed to both of my interests, both on the creative side and the more strategic and technical side.
Super interesting. And then essentially just to kind of recalibrate and go through, what you described before, you then go in and you work on the agency side and you're working with some of these large organizations. That doesn't enable you to kind of have that variety, if you like, in terms of the work that you're doing. Or as you alluded to, I really like that term applied within this context, transparency around like the impact of what you're doing. So then it becomes, you're almost at this stage thinking, I want to see and experience more impact of my work directly, which then led you to making the choices to go and work with smaller organizations and startup entities. When you were going, in terms of the role or the titles, were you able to move from the agency side into roles which kind of essentially in their very nature were roles that allowed you to look at far more aspects, if you like, of marketing broadly? Can you touch upon maybe kind of the variety of what you're involved in at SEEP as the Chief Marketing Officer? Am I right in thinking you're a Chief Marketing Officer? Is that correct?
Head of marketing. Yeah. I mean, yeah, similar things. I'm pretty much heading up the marketing. We're a really small team, so we're a team of 6. And I just work with a brand and content lead, so a very small team. But yeah, essentially heading up the marketing. But yeah, so like in terms of, I guess, like transitioning into like a role that encompasses more than just kind of the digital side. So I think what really was beneficial agency side was getting a really good foundation around the digital side of business. So the agency I worked for, which was Essence, it started out just being a digital agency, but now it does everything from like out of home, SEO. But when I was there, it was very much focused on digital marketing. So like your Meta campaigns, your Google campaigns, and that gave me a really strong foundation on the digital side of businesses. And actually that's really beneficial when you go into startups, because they usually grow from a digital perspective, because, setting up ads on Meta is usually very cost effective. For smaller businesses that don't have a big budget, you can see results really quickly. So it's definitely like a skill that is really important if you're joining a growing business. So I think it's a really huge benefit to have that skill set going into scale-ups and startups. So when I kind of started my role at SEEP, it was definitely about, hey, how can we improve like our Meta ad campaigns, but also kind of like as head of marketing, growing out the channels. So kind of I launched kind of like the affiliate program at SEEP, which is kind of on digital side as well, but also involved in email marketing. But also there's things that you have to manage on the website. So for example, we use Shopify, and making sure that the content is all aligned across all of your channels, that you have a kind of like the right product descriptions. And then also on top of that, like just A/B testing across all of those different channels. And then once you have retail, you're also involved from the marketing side in the retail content. So, the banners or, point of sales leaflets for the retail teams. So yeah, you kind of like naturally progress into all of those different areas of marketing. And I don't think it was very difficult for me. There's lots that I have to learn, of course, but I think it always started out as kind of like a digital first business, I would say. Now retail makes part of it, and it's starting to make a bigger part of it. But I think that foundation just was really important and a really big part of these small businesses. So it's just like a natural progression, I guess. And I guess as long as that you're curious, you're interested in learning more, you're not daunted by things that you don't know, and you just go for it. I think that's a really important kind of like approach and skill to have.
Yeah, that's super yeah, and refreshing. It's great to to find yourself at fairly sort of early stages, I guess, overall of your career, and find yourself in a senior position as you are, to still have that humility to be curious and to be yeah, to be creative in terms of thinking about ways that you can develop and learn and evolve is super interesting. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate, Sylvia. So I'm even more delighted that we've managed to snaffle you for a show this morning. I want to just touch upon now. You mentioned how one of the things when you came out of the agency side and you looked at, and I'm just recalling Albright as being one of the startups or smaller organizations that you looked to kind of join
Hmm.
after leaving agency side. You talked about impact, and it was almost, I want to join an organization that's having a societal impact, and that was what Albright sort of facilitated. And then the sustainability angle became more present and more interesting, I guess, at the point at which you joined Seep. Can I just ask you about kind of what that experience has been like for you through Seep, of kind of learning and developing an appreciation and understanding of, I guess, broadly the environmental sustainability issues at play? In fact, let me, before I go on and ask you another question, that's one to start with. So yeah, just give us a take on that.
Yeah, so yeah, as I said, like I was always really interested in kind of like the positive impact that a business can have. So at Albright, I really, saw that the impact that, the positive impact you can have on women. Funding for women makes up a really small chunk of total funding that's given out to female-led businesses, that sort of thing. Laura happened to be, a female-founded business, which was also really great. But yeah, I think like that it's just it's just a good feeling to be able to be part of a business or marketing something that's actually doing something positive, rather than just churning out, marketing campaigns that you don't see. Maybe that's not linked to a real purpose.
Mhm.
I think at Seep, for me, it was really clear kind of when I joined that there was that deep purpose and meaning behind the brand. And I think like thinking of Seep and the sustainable side of it, what I learned, I think, from joining is that, it's not always very straightforward. There's a lot of education that you need to do when you're marketing kind of like a sustainable product. Our product, as you might have seen, it's why it looks very different to the traditional product, which is yellow and green. So we have a big role in first like making people aware that the yellow ones are not good, but then also showing that there's an alternative option, because there aren't any. I don't think when you go into your supermarket aisle today, you'll see like a sustainable sponge. Like you just won't
Mhm.
know what it looks like, that there is the option. So I think there's a lot of education that comes with marketing a product, a sustainable one, if it looks like very different to the traditional ones, which happen to be, Seep products. So I think like that was a really big learning for me from a marketing perspective. You often have to reference, like we often reference the yellow sponge because that's what people are used to seeing.
Mhm.
Um, and then also there's the whole world of, sustainability wording, jargon that, from a consumer perspective, I wasn't aware of, you know, compostable, what does that mean? Biodegradable, what does that mean? So that was a whole other world that I kind of had to become more educated in. And then as you become more educated, you see all these different things in your daily life that you hadn't kind of noticed. For example, if I think about the UK and where I have lived, I didn't always have kind of like a food waste system in place. Depending on your council, maybe you have food waste, maybe you don't. When you put out your bins, you have different colored bins, or sometimes you don't. It's just like a communal bin. You have like different colored plastic bags that you have to use. Um, for different things. So I think like that whole system is also just generally quite confusing. And you don't
Mhm.
realize that until like you work for a sustainable brand and you see like actually in our lifestyles, there are all these different things that are quite confusing that make this whole world a little confusing to consumers. Like no wonder they find it really hard to understand, because as a normal person coming into the sustainability world where I didn't really have, a a really strong understanding of sustainability, or wasn't like living, like plastic free and self-sufficient, because I don't think that's very realistic in this world. That it is quite a confusing place, and we have that job of kind of making it clear and less complex, I guess.
And out of interest of it, it's super interesting to hear that kind of personal experience. Would you say that you, because of the requirement within the role to get curious around sustainability and almost to what's the word, expose yourself, if you like, to these issues that you've just alluded to, has that made you personally more passionate about what you're doing? Do you think that that's really aided kind of, I guess, the energy that you have for the work that you're doing at Seed?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think any like small things, like I don't believe that anyone, needs to be completely plastic free or completely sustainable. I think that there are small things that you can do in your daily life, or small changes you can make that kind of help support, a more sustainable kind of lifestyle. Um, and I think like, yeah, the impact that we're seeing. So for example, our mission is to eliminate 1 billion plastic cleaning tools from going to landfill by 2030. So far, I think we've prevented over 3.5 million plastic cleaning tools from ending in landfill. And that's like a lot when you think about it. I mean, it's kind of a small part of, cleaning tools are a small part of daily life, but I think the impact that it can have, and the reduction of like plastic and the production of plastic that we're supporting is, I think, like really huge. So that impact, I think, is really important to like see, and I guess like feel when it comes to working in a role like this. And then I think you do become more conscious about like kind of your daily life, what you use, what you're doing. So becoming less reliant on plastic. We've been involved in campaigns. For example, Greenpeace do this big plastic count, I think every 2 or 3 years. So we're always involved in that. And then you count your plastic, you see how much plastic waste you produce in your home. And that's eye-opening as well, because usually you're not really conscious about all of those things. But when you start doing it, you're like, oh, okay, that's a lot of plastic. And I guess like, yeah, I think just generally you become more conscious about your kind of like the choices that you make when you go to the supermarket, or yeah, when you do different things.
Super interesting, Silver. Super interesting. Let me ask you. I want to ask you a question again, specifically thinking about you and your career and what you're aiming to do. I always think this is a fascinating question to ask people. When you get to the end of your career and you're looking back on what you've done, what do you want to be able to say about what you've done?
That's quite interesting. I think like I'd want to say that like I made a difference. I think that's the big thing. Like I did something that actually made a difference to the world, or I changed something for the better, I guess. I don't think I'd want to get to the end of it and then think I didn't do anything differently, or I didn't have an impact on, I guess, like the future of society, or maybe the planet. Like I wanted to, I did something that actually like people saw and they used or they experienced, and that changed the way maybe they thought about things for the better, or had a positive impact. So I think that's what I'd want to know I did.
Well, I love that. Yeah, and that I think you can even see from the choices that you've obviously made so far in your career. You can see that that's very much the trajectory that you've gone on. I mean, I know that we've had other guests on before who have explained similar circumstances in their career, i.e., realizing that they're selling a lot of something that doesn't necessarily have a positive effect, and ultimately, is it something that people really need, and is it sort of aiding and promoting overconsumption of something that's ultimately damaging to our society and our environment? And then 20 years down the road, or 25 years down the road, they make the decision to actually go and do something about it, in the sense of working with an organization that is having a positive impact. I think from your perspective, and the fact that you've made the decision to do that so early on, if you like, in your career, I think that's testament to your, I guess, conviction to go down that route. So Yeah, that would be my very unsolicited view, if you like, of what you've done so far.
Yeah.
Sylvia, that was brilliant. Do you know what? I've actually never done this before, but we've actually timed that perfectly. So we've gone 20 minutes of About You, and we've nailed it, which doesn't often
Nice.
happen. Thank you for sharing insights into your background and why you've done what you do. Can we now move on and introduce this show's article? I think it was a piece written by Vinit Doshi and Steve Noble in McKinsey's blog. And it obviously touches, I think, on a piece of research and a podcast. Would you mind just initially starting by giving our listeners just a bit of a summary of what the piece covers?
Yeah, of course. So it was a McKinsey article that explores, I guess, generally the increasing consumer demand for sustainable products, and it's backed by kind of the research showing that the increasing interest in sustainability is actually translating into real kind of purchasing behavior. So products that promote like eco-friendly, ethical, responsible claims or attributes actually experience higher growth than kind of other products on the aisle. And so I think like some general points that are pulled from that is that the brands that do have these sustainability claims grow at a much faster rate than other products. Consumers are more likely to buy into these product claims. I thought one thing that was interesting is specifically claims about regarding packaging. So I think it was something like 60% of people will buy a product if it has a sustainability claim, particularly about the packaging. So I guess like if it's FSC or something like that, I thought that was really quite interesting, that specific point about just the packaging being sustainable. And then also it pulls out kind of that Gen Z or millennials are really leading the charge in terms of this consumer purchasing behavior. They're buying into products that align with their sustainability values. So that's also interesting as well. But yeah, I think those were kind of like the key points. I think some other interesting points that I pulled from it is that, you know, these products that do have these sustainability values come out of the recession much better than those that don't. And I guess like it's linked to being more sustainable in terms of business. They're more set up for long-term success. And I think that is also down to kind of that these sustainable products have more loyal customers. So, you know, people are really buying and investing into the story and the sustainability aspects of these brands and products. And so I guess they're becoming more loyal to them. And I found that really interesting as well.
And Sylvia, I've got that. By the way, that was a brilliant introduction and synopsis and summary. So thank you for that. That was really clear and well defined. Just on that point, I've got a couple of questions, but just on that point regarding customers of sustainability products, brands, etc., being essentially more loyal perhaps to that brand. Is that because of that, in your mind, is that because of that sense of kind of identity that, you know, I see myself as an ethical consumer, a sustainable consumer, and now this brand is giving me an opportunity to manifest that identity, if you like, through a purchase of this particular type of product? I provided a summary there. Is that in your mind why there is that stickability, if you like?
Yeah, like I definitely think that it has to do with like, you know, their values. And if they're seeing, for example, if they're seeing all this waste that they're producing at home and they can make small changes where they're seeing less of that waste, and that aligns with, you know, their values or making a little bit more of a positive impact on the environment or society, then I think, yeah, that's why. But also I think that, you know, these brands usually have a purpose like we do. They have a story behind it. So, you know, Laura has a story about why, you know, she started this business and what she wants to achieve. And I think that also resonates with consumers. And I guess it makes it a little bit more human rather than, you could say, legacy brands that have been around for ages. They don't have like a founder story. They don't have a real purpose, at least in the cleaning aisle. I don't think you can think of like a brand like Spontex or Veleda that has, you know, this reason for being, I guess, is what I want to say. So I think that really, I think, connects with customers on a different level. But also, I think just the nature of, for example, like a brand like us, we grew in the digital e-com era, whereas legacy brands haven't. So we kind of have an upper hand when it comes to, building out these communities that we can continuously engage with. So we have a really strong, social following. Through email, we continue to tell our story, our achievements as well as our challenges. So I think in all of those different ways, we're able to connect with the customers on a deeper level. And I think that's what also builds that loyalty.
Yeah, nice. That makes a lot of sense in terms of those multiple touch points. We will come back to Seep as we go through the rest of the episode, but I want to get your take on the broader point. For me, it's the elephant in the room, if you like, when we read research pieces like this that seem to suggest or propose that based upon consumer research and surveying, everyone wants to make the sustainable choice. Everybody says that they ultimately will prioritize making the sustainable choice. And then when you actually look at the figures themselves, you realize that it's the convenient and cost-effective choice that ultimately is the one that is prioritized. And if it happens to be a sustainable choice as well, that ultimately is a Brucey bonus. Can you just provide your take and insight on that elephant in the room, if you like, and what what sustainable brands can do from from a perspective of how to address and deal with those issues?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think touching upon, like, for example, price premium, that's always something you kind of touched on that. And definitely sustainable products will always, in my opinion, come at a premium, I guess, unless there's like huge demand, and in that way we can slowly reduce costs. But we just use higher quality. So I guess from marketing perspective, what we do is really highlight kind of what that means to the end consumers. So we use higher quality products. Our products last just as long as the traditional alternatives, or even longer. For example, for our sponges, some of our customers use them for a year, like one sponge for a year, which is very questionable, actually. But it's crazy how sometimes these are longer lasting, because like you can wash our sponges, people can reuse them for, I guess, as long as they see fit. So I think it's like communicating what are those benefits that justify those higher price points. I don't think you can just put a sustainable product out there, put a higher price point, and then think that someone will buy it. I think it's really communicating actually what are the benefits to the customer, which is, the longevity, the quality, the usability, and also at the end of life, how you dispose of it in kind of like a positive way. So for example, you can compost our sponges, you can put it in your food waste bin, and things like that. So yeah, I think like that's always something, I guess that's part of like the education piece, right? We always have that big role in educating customers because they don't really know about these different things. But if you are really invested in supporting kind of like a more, or having a more positive impact, then I think it's kind of like one of the ways that you can do it that is quite easy. So yeah, I think it's just communicating those benefits. And I think there's nothing, unless like we have really, really high demand, which is what we eventually want. If more people buy these sustainable products, we can reduce the cost of all these materials, because there's going to be more demand, there's going to be more people wanting it. And that's what we want. But I think that's kind of like a slow process. We're also always looking to improve the ways we do things. So potentially in the future, using food waste itself, and then how can we incorporate that more into how we create our products. But that also takes time and a lot of investment financially. So I think it's all like a process and journey, isn't it?
Yeah, no, Sylvia, it's yeah, I think that was really interesting and compelling. I think just touching back on your point about education, for me, in what you've described there's an opportunity to say, well, look, if we know that there is obviously this customer base who see the value in making the sustainable choice because of the impact from a sustainability perspective in of itself, fantastic. But there's actually another group that if we can educate them about the implications of making this choice on convenience and value or price, if you like, in terms of, as you say, the length of time that you can use one of these products versus a traditional product, perhaps how easy it is to ultimately to get rid of the product at the end of its life. These are that you can still play the game, if you like, of the majority of customers out there. You just have to get that educational piece right. Is that a fair synopsis of?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sums it up really well. And I think also just like the awareness piece as well, because a lot of the times people don't know that the product they're using maybe is bad for the environment, or that it is actually made from plastic. So I think that awareness piece is really important as well as making them aware that there is another choice. Because, for example, a product like ours is not available on shelf today. So how do we build up that awareness and that accessibility, I guess, that, even though maybe it's a higher price point, maybe at that point of purchase, they might just be swayed because of the values that sit behind kind of like a product or brand. So yeah, it's definitely like, all the points that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, super interesting. Sylvia, fantastic. I want to get you're a senior marketeer. We obviously, the article talked glowingly about the temptation in many ways to position the organizations or the brands that we work for to be seen as sustainable as possible, because of obviously all of the associated value of doing so. What that leads to, especially with creative marketers thinking about, how do we convince, how do we draw attention, etc., to what we're doing. There's always the opportunity to overstate our positioning. From your perspective, and obviously you've moved into working with a brand that does sort of present its environmental credentials as kind of a core part of the offering. Like, what is your approach to addressing, greenwashing and associated issues around that?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is that even though we have a purpose there, it's usually backed up with, say, certification. For example, we're part of B Corp, which is kind of considered the high standard for social and environmental performance. We use FSC packaging, and clearly see the certification around that on our kind of like products and the packs. So we try to substantiate all of those kind of like claims that we make, in a sense. But also on top of that, we're just very transparent. So if you go to our website, we have impact reports. If like customers, we have very approachable, friendly customer service. If a customer would like to know more about a specific thing, we're always open to like sharing reports or anything that they would need to help make them make that choice. So we're always very open. We use like clear and simple wording. So on our packaging, on our website, there's no like complex or corporate wording. We try and make it simple. We're also transparent in the sense that, we show where our products are sourced from. So, depending on the product, they're sourced from different places around the world. So I think that transparency is really important. And it's about like helping the customer easily find what they need to make that choice, and being upfront and transparent about, where our products come from. So I think that aspect is really important. And if you can't find those things from a brand, then that might kind of raise a red flag or something like that. But I think that transparency part is really important. And we also, on top of that, kind of always bring customers on a journey with us. And it's also about educating the customer themselves, kind of like what we've kind of spoken about quite a lot actually so far. But if you go kind of like on our social medias, it's not just like tips about sustainable cleaning, but just like general like support for living a more sustainable lifestyle. We always cross promote other sustainable products, so that if customers are interested in anything else in their lifestyle that they're looking to make the switch from, like we always propose kind of like other B Corp brands, for example, and other categories. We also have kind of like a founding customer base, and we use their feedback on products, for example, our prototypes, or just general feedback on how we're doing as a business, to help improve what we do. So I think there's so many ways that we help facilitate kind of like that customer journey, but also engage our customer base, so that we're ensuring that we're co-creating, I guess, in some ways, a brand that's that works and is useful for customers, but also that supports kind of like our mission as well.
So it sounds awesome. And again, as with a number of instances, another responses during the show, it's clear that you guys are doing a lot, and you've got a lot on your plate. Let me ask you, no business is truly sustainable. Like we're all on a I hate using the term journey, but I'm going to use it. We're all on a journey, if you like, on that continuum. Out of interest, when considering SEEP, like what are those areas that you guys have identified as areas for improvement in terms of your sustainability credentials?
Yeah, so I guess one that comes up a lot is, so some of our products, for example, our bin liners are sourced from Belgium, our copper scourers from Italy, and then our sponge scourers, which are a bestseller, are sourced from China. And we always get like, oh, why they source from China? It's why aren't they sourced in the UK? And I think like sometimes you're very limited as a business. So for example, for our sponge scourers, we use wood pulp and loofah, which is a cucumber that grows on a crop vine. You like China is just the place that it grows. Actually, loofah is actually used in some of the foods that they eat. Like it grows the best in climate in countries with the climate that China has. So we've tried to source, for example, in the UK or closer in Europe, but the suppliers, they don't have the advanced technology that we need to create the product that we have. Technology isn't much more advanced in China. Suppliers aren't able to fulfill kind of the volume of ores that we need as well. So I think we're, in that sense, we're sometimes very limited, but we always do our best to kind of, for example, externally audit these factories. We work with them on kind of improving their sustainability credentials as well. And we also choose kind of the fact if we think that we've actually changed factories. So if we think that maybe the employees in those factories aren't paid minimum wage, for example, we definitely would change to go with one that is, more ethically in line with our values. So I think like definitely in the sourcing sense, we're limited, and that's like a question that comes up a lot. But also when there is no other real alternative that we can at this moment consider, then yeah, that is also a limitation for us. So I think that probably is a big one. And if something does, if there is like an opportunity, and we're always looking for new opportunities, but if there is an opportunity that is closer to home, that is closer to the UK, or in Europe, where we can produce the quality of product that we need, then we would definitely consider it and do it.
And I think that's, I mean, again, it's super to hear, that part, I think, Silva. I think, just thinking about one of the things that we now do with all of our signatories at the Anti-Greenwash Charters, we have a required section within every Green Claims policy where all of our signatories have to detail areas for improvement and things that they're doing in order to address that. And the thing that we've found, especially within the kind of the greenwashing space, if you like, is that it is incredibly disarming, if you like, of the naysayers or the critics, if you like, of what you're doing. If we as organizations can be upfront about, these are some areas that we know that we're not 100% there. These are the things that we're doing in order to address it. But crucially, as you've alluded to, even if there isn't a solution right now, we are constantly scanning, and we have a process for scanning and researching essentially alternatives and opportunities to improve. And I love that as almost a disarming of, we haven't got a solution to this problem right now, but we are doing something in order to enable that solution at some point in the future. Was that as fair a summary of of the way that you guys are approaching it?
Definitely. And I think like we're also very transparent about it. So you will see on our website, if you go to our sponge scourer page, that they are sourced from China. So we're upfront about it. We have a blog as to why we are sourcing from China, because at the moment we can't find an alternative option that creates the product that we want to give to our customers. So yeah, I think it's fair to say kind of like there's always, and sustainability isn't like a one-off thing, it's a journey, right? And there's always room for improvement. And I think that's kind of something that the B Corp certification also holds you up to, because for example, now we're going through our recertification. So you can lose your certification, but it's always about ensuring that you're making progress as a business, or you're making changes year on year to improve kind of like your processes, your supply chain, your products, or whatever it may be, for for the planet and people.
It's interesting. Yeah, we've got a number of our charter signatories who are also B Corps, and again, it's that, as you say, that raising of that standard year on year, that opportunity to get better and better. And I think a number of the B Corps that we're working with have seen the value in going this step further, if you like, in terms of management of their marketing and communications by adopting a green claims policy and becoming a signatory of the charter. So yeah, that very much rings true, that continuous improvement and development in terms of the work that we're doing. Sylvia, let me ask you, I want to come back to a comment that you made earlier about language. You spoke about, when you got into the realm of working within a sustainable brand business, that you were confronted by this sort of word jargon, if you like, and you've alluded to the fact that one of the key things that you guys focus on is the simplicity of the use of language. Without talking necessarily directly about SEEP, but just more about your take on language associated with sustainability and the implications for you as a marketeer and what that means to you. Can you just touch upon what you think the state of the play is right now generally in sustainability in terms of language, and what you think the solution should be in terms of perhaps further simplification and uniformity? Is that the right word? Probably used it, but simplicity in terms of language. Can you just touch on that for us?
So I just think because coming into it, the language is very confusing. I mean, there's so many degradable, biodegradable, compostable, all of these different words that you can use, and some of them not really meaning anything in particular, like eco-friendly. What does eco mean? But for example, we do use eco sponge scourer, eco copper scourer, because it is language that people understand. So when people see the word eco, they immediately know that it is some sort of sustainable brand. But it can also be used in a negative sense. For example, for greenwashing, you can say that, suggesting that it's eco, but it isn't. So yeah, I just think it is definitely a confusing world, and I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I don't think there's a simple answer, to be honest. But
other than education, other than you've alluded to throughout that education is key, educating stakeholders around all sustainability kind of issues relating to your brand and your business is important, and perhaps language is a core part of that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. But also, I guess, just being upfront and saying what something is. So I guess this is again taking from examples in my work at SEEP. But what we found is that people, when we ask a customers, oh, why did you choose SEEP? They always what were the things that made you buy? And what they always say is it was plastic free. And plastic free is kind of a word that immediately describes our product. You know what plastic free means. It does not contain plastic, and that's really simple, I guess, terminology, and says what it is and what it, not necessarily what it does, but basically what it is. And maybe we should move to language that is clearer about what the product actually is. It's plastic free. It doesn't contain chemicals, or I don't know, depending on whatever category it is. I think just being upfront and being clear about what actually is it that your product is solving in the world, and making it very, and I guess coming back to language that is kind of used daily, or language that is not related to maybe compostability, sustainability, or all that jargon. Just being clear and upfront and using terminology that people just would use in normal conversation, I guess. But yeah, it is confusing. I mean, and also, but on top of that, also all the certifications that you can get, I think some of them people don't really understand, to be honest, but maybe they see some sort of certification and they just think that there is, I guess, more trust linked to that brand or something to back it up. But I think potentially the language or the simplicity of the language can help describe the problem that the product is trying to solve.
It's really interesting. So I'm inclined to ask you which, if there are any examples that you can pick out for us in terms of trust marks that perhaps do a poor job of conveying the value of them. But I'll leave that one. Perhaps we can have a conversation that afterwards. One thought though, we're talking to quite a lot of people about almost sort of thinking about like the depth of your content, and thinking about how like content at the kind of presentational level, if you like, often as we as marketers, we don't have a huge amount of space, in all honesty, to be able to convey the complexity, if you like, of the claim that we're making. But what we can do is we can think about, well, how many layers of presentation content am I having to go through before I get to the clearly defined evidence that's provided for that particular claim, and to narrow, if you like, that depth, or to sort of to reduce that height, if you like, of that stack between presentation and evidence, is one way that we can make the information much more accessible to users. And it sounds like that's something that you guys at Seep have been doing with some of the things you suggested earlier on your website. Sylvia, we've done the classic thing of like running through 45 minutes there in like no time at all. I don't know about you, but it's flashed by. We always finish each show with the magic wand question. So I'd ask you, if we were to hand you that magic wand and you could change one thing about the corporate world, or commercial world, should I say, this instant, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely balancing financial performance with, I guess, sustainable impact, which is kind of like what B Corp is set out to do, but maybe shifting from thinking like, so short term about profit, and maybe success being, those 10 and 20-year goals that allow businesses to think more holistically. And that would maybe make maybe some of those softer values, like empathy, become kind of like some of the core the core goal that a company is trying to build towards. And that generally creates, a positive future for people and planet. So I think, yeah, that would be essentially like the dream, isn't it? Like that success is not so short term, but more of those long-term goals.
I love that. So that's not a magic wand suggestion that we've had so far, and I think that's a brilliant one. Great way to end. I think as you say, a bit more long-term thinking would do us all a lot of good, not just in the corporate world, but obviously in the political world too. Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us today. That was, I know, a whistle-stop tour, but I, for one, learned a lot. And thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.